Hello and welcome back. So today we'll be implementing a high score and score, and also the power up and power down drops. Let's go ahead and add a UI canvas text. Now we got this text here, and let's make sure that we select the canvas and go to render mode to be, the UI scale mode to be scale with screen size. That way, even if you have different resolution, it will always be the same. And let's position this text in the left corner. You can click on this anchor presets and hold down Alt to instantly move the text to a different position. Usually the score is in the top left. Now let's just increase the width and height to maybe 250. And let's set the position on the Y to maybe minus 25 and the position on the X to 120. Now I'm going to increase the font size to 18 and just call this score. Score. Maybe also set the color to be white. And then I'm going to duplicate it and call this text score and set the value of this to be 0. And I'm just going to move it to maybe position 150. Actually, let's say 200, that's too much, so 180, 90, okay, so that's our numbers, and this will be our score. When the player kills an enemy, he'll get some score. By default, it's of course 0. Now let's open up our player script and go to the player character. Now let's create a public int score, and let's get a integer called high score here. And basically, whenever we kill an enemy, let's go ahead and just see something. Whenever we kill an enemy, I want to give the player some score. But let's just say that we also need the reference to the score text. So let's say public text. And since we're working with Unity UI, we need to implement the libraries for Unity UI. So let's say using Unity engine.ui. And now I'm going to get a public text and I call it score text. And basically in my update method, I'll make sure that score text.text is equal to score to string. So each frame I will be updating my score. And score text.text, as we spoke about previously in the canvas, will just set the text of the score to be equal to our current score, just transferring from integer to string. Now let's go ahead and open up the enemy controller script. And let's find the script here. When the bullet kills the enemy, we want to give the player some score. But we don't know how much score we want to give him. So let's go ahead and create a public integer score reward, so that each one of these enemies has a unique score reward when you kill him. Some might drop you 2, some might drop you 5, and others might drop you 10 score. Let's go ahead and scroll down on the onTrigger enter method, and right before we destroy the enemies, we want to let's create a new method called void destroy self. And what I want this to do is basically actually, let's not do it like this. There's no need. So if the health is less than or equal to 0, we want to destroy the game object. But first, before we do that, we want to give the player some score. So let's go ahead and say collision.gameObject, and let's get the component. We want to get the player character script, because that script holds our score, and we want to say score plus equals score reward. So we will increase the player's score when we kill an enemy by the amount of score reward specified by us. And let's also copy this. Let's copy all of this code and replace it with this here. So now when the bullet kills this enemy, and if its health is less than or equal to 0, we will get the player character component from the player character. Actually, you see, Now this wouldn't work because here we're checking if the collision game object is the bullet. So if we're colliding with the bullet, sorry about that. And if we are, what we're going to do is we destroy the bullet and then we create the particle. Then we subtract health. And if the health is less than or equal to 0, and here we try to get the player character component from the collision game object, but we can't do that because the bullet doesn't have the player character component. So we can do it like this. Let's delete this and go ahead and say game object. Find game object. Oops. Find game object with tag, and the tag is player. And we want to get component player character, and we want to increase the score by the score reward. There we go. So if our HP is less than or equal to 0 by a bullet collision, we're going to find the game object with tag player and get the script. Then we will increase the score. So let's save this. Make sure that the player character has the tag player here. And now go to our invaders. And you can see now that we have the score reward here. I will set this. So the first one, I want him to give me 5 points. The second one will give me 10. And the third one will give me 15. Also, we need to click on our player character and make sure that our score text is indeed connected to the score. Now, if I run this, you will see as I'm killing these enemies, I'm getting more score. There we go. Now let's create a high score. Now let's move back to the player character, and I believe we spoke about player preferences, but if we didn't, basically we just create a file with some kind of name and we plug in some kind of value to that preference. So let's say that, let's go ahead and say if score is greater than high score. Oh, just a moment please. If score is greater than high score, what we want to do is player preferences, set integer, set int, and we want to call this integer high score, and we want to set its value to be equal to high score. But before we do that, we want to set high score to be equal to score. And now if the score is greater than the high score, we will set the high score to be equal to the score, and then set the player preferences to be the high score. But when you first start off the game, you don't have a high score. So let's just, when the start method goes, I'm going to check if player prefs has key. This means if the high score has been created. So if this is false, I'm going to set the high score. I'm going to set high score to be equal to 0, and then I'm going to create it by saying player prefs.set int high score Let me just copy this. I had a typo there. There we go. So now when the game starts, if this wasn't created, we're going to set the high score to 0 and then create it. And when our score is greater than the high score, we will set the high score to be equal to score and then save that as well. So in the next lecture, we will be adding the power-ups and power-downs, and we'll also display the high score when we die. Until then, goodbye and see you next time.